All right, we will switch to House File 2313, Representative Purcell, Border-to-Border Broadband Grant Program. And Representative Purcell, please move your bill.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I move House File 2313 before the committee.
All right.
To be included, for possible inclusion in an agricultural omnibus bill.
All right. Thank you, Representative Purcell. I like to note that we also have the DE1 amendment, and because it did not make the committee deadline for amendments, we will just discuss the DE1 amendment and not take any formal action, and there will be future opportunities to take formal action on the DE1 amendment. And I will just move the DE1 amendment before the committee for discussion. And Representative Purcell, do you want to talk about the DE1?
Sure. Thank you, Madam Chair. House File 2313 would bring more money to Border-to-Border Broadband Grant Program. It matches the governor's funding request of $276 million over the next 2 years. I would like to extend my apologies for not getting this amendment in on time. First year mistake, lesson learned. So my apologies about the tardiness of the amendment. So this bill does two things. It adds that $276 million to the standard border-to-border grant program. It increases the per grant cap from $5 million to $10 million. And then the amendment that we are only just discussing also has a lower population density program and allocating additional funds so that we could fund up to 75% of those project costs in the most difficult to reach parts of the state. Let's see. So our state broadband grant program has been distributing funds since 2015 and has a proven record of partnering with local governments and private businesses to bring broadband to communities that have no or slow service. Other states have even used Minnesota as a model to design their own grant programs. The grant program has historically been funded with one-time money from state surplus dollars. House File 2313 would again do just that. Additional funding is necessary to ensure the standard grant program does not miss a construction season while we wait for federal funds to arrive. Providers in communities that have large areas of no service often need to complete work in phases because each project can only receive $5 million. Increasing the cap to $10 million would relieve some planning stress on providers and their local partners. Last year, the legislature allocated $30 million of federal funding to create the Lowered Population Density Pilot Program. This program allows the state to pay for up to 75% of project costs. These projects are in the hardest to serve area, which will almost certainly never receive broadband service without some state investment. I have an amendment, the DE, that would continue funding this program for the next 2 years. I've learned a lot about this program, but I have testifiers who know more than I do on this issue, so now I'd like to yield my time to testifiers, Madam Chair.
All right, the first testifier is Nathan Zacharias from Association of Minnesota Counties. If you can please identify yourself before the committee and proceed.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members. My name is Nathan Zacharias, and I am the Technology Policy Analyst for the Association of Minnesota Counties. I want to begin by thanking you, Chair Vang, Representative Purcell, Representative Anderson, Representative Lislegard, and all the other bill authors for their work in bringing this bill forward today. I'm here today to ask for your support of House File 2313, a bill that would provide the border-to-border grant program housed in the Office of Broadband Development with an additional $276 million. And as Representative Purcell said, it would also increase the per grant cap from $5 million to $10 million per project. 12% of Minnesota households and businesses do not have access to broadband speeds that meet our state's statutory speed goals. And that number jumps to nearly 38% in rural Minnesota. The demand for high-speed broadband is not going away, and every facet of modern life and business and farming depends on it. It is true that the state is set to receive funding to deploy broadband through the Federal Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. But the Governor's Broadband Task Force 2022 annual report found a $426 million gap between all available state funds, estimated federal funding, and what it would cost to connect every household and business in the state. House File 2313 would help us close that gap. Additionally, the timeline for when federal funding will arrive in state coffers is unclear. Recent federal broadband programs were hampered by significant delays, causing the state's grant program to miss the entire construction season in 2021. And we cannot afford for that to happen again. The funding in House File 2313 would serve as a critical bridge between what we currently have available for funding and the forthcoming federal funds through the IIJA. And just briefly to the DE amendment that we're discussing today, I just wanted to touch on this. I know it'll be perhaps added at a later date, but the Association of Minnesota Counties supported the creation of the lower population density pilot program last session and strongly supports the addition of the $60 million to the program for the next 2 years. Counties with small populations and equally small tax bases have found it nearly impossible to deploy broadband in their communities. This low-density program allows the state to match up to 75% of the project cost in some of the hardest to serve areas of the state, and it creates a separate pool of money for communities that can't contribute significant local tax dollars to fund a broadband grant. Thank you for the opportunity to testify today. I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
All right, thank you, Nathan. The next person we have is Steve Georgie, Executive Director. Yes. If you could please identify yourself before the committee and proceed.
Thank you, Chair Vang. My name is Steve Georgie. I'm the Executive Director of the Range Association of Municipalities and Schools, better known by the acronym RAMS. I served on the Governor's Broadband Task Force for the past 4 years. I also serve on the Minnesota Rural Broadband Coalition Advisory Board for the past 4 years as well. I'm certainly here today in support of Representative Purcell's bill to fund broadband expansion in Minnesota at the tune of $278 million for the biennium. I want to remind the committee here today that Minnesota has set benchmarks for broadband expansion. The first goal was by 2022, all Minnesotans would be connected to wireline service of 25 down and 3 up. We did not succeed in accomplishing that goal. We currently have 291,000 unserved Minnesotans that have less than 100 down, 20 up. And in rural Minnesota, 180,000 Minnesotans are without 25/3 service. So we're going back to copper telephone wire service in many locations. So we have to do better, we have to fund. We missed 2 grant cycles in the state of Minnesota in 2018 and 2021. We can't afford to miss anymore, we're falling behind. One of the other goals in the legislature is that Minnesota would be in the top 5 states in the country for broadband connection and access. We're currently ranked between 19th and 26th, depending on which poll you look at. So once again, the need and the demand is certainly there. Nathan touched on the estimated cost to connect all Minnesotans, and you heard that, and we are sorely missing. I'd like to give you an example of what's happening up on the Iron Range where we have bedrock, and it's increasingly difficult and challenging for companies to do projects. We're very fortunate that we have some good providers that are submitting for broadband grants at the $5 million level and have succeeded. But here's an example of a project, fortunately, for the Boys Fort Reservation area by Lake Vermilion up to Orr and Net Lake. It started off 3 years ago looking at 440 homes on the tribal reservation land. And simply because of cost and the opportunity to succeed with a project, it was not completed. Just this year, they were awarded a $19.8 million grant from the NTIA Tribal Broadband Connectivity Program. So now this project can actually cover 3,200 homes and businesses. So they can go from the reservation on Lake Vermilion up to the city of Orr, cover most of Pelican Lake up to Net Lake where their other elementary school is. So what's interesting is they have to lay 375 miles of new fiber optic cable. And in the assessment to do this project, 98% of the locations were unserved. 98%. So we have a long way to go to get connected. Another example is Paul Bunyan is another provider that's going to do a project just outside of the center of the universe, as Senator Tomasoni said, the city of Chisholm. The neighboring township is Balkan, and a little bit northeast of that is another township named Angora. So looking at that project, the passing density in Angora is 3.31 homes per mile. The cost per each passing is $15,558. In Balkan, the passing density is 5.06. The average cost of passing is $9,700. So average on this project, the average is 4.3 per mile and $11,650. So there's no way this project could be done if not for the low density pilot program that's in effect today with the 30 million. We're hoping that they get awarded the grant.
Director
But what's
Steve?
also interesting, if I may.
Sorry, Director Steve, if you can please wrap up your testimony. I want to make sure the other testifier have enough time to share their testimony too as well.
Sure. But I just want to make this point. So if they get the 75% grant, they have to borrow money for their portion, which is 1.8 million. The project is expected to lose $412,000 in the first 4 years of operation. They finally earned $5,800 in 2029. This is the reality of projects in rural Minnesota with low density. So we really support the amendment and the bill itself. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Steve. The next testifier is Brent Christensen from Minnesota Telecom Alliance. We do have a very full agenda, so if you can please keep your testimony hopefully under 2 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I will absolutely do that. For the record, my name is Brent Christensen, and I'm the President and CEO of the Minnesota Telecom Alliance, or MTA. MTA membership is a mix of family-owned companies, cooperatives, privately held and publicly traded broadband providers throughout Minnesota. While MTA members have different corporate structures, one thing we all have in common is our commitment to serving Minnesota. I'm here to fully support House File 2313 and very much appreciate Representative Purcell's bringing it forward. And I would ask you to support the DE amendment when it comes time. We have long debated the 50% broadband grant match. We all know at some point a 50% match won't make sense as we get more and more state covered by broadband. The remaining projects will inevitably require a greater state match. The problem is that these projects require more state money and consistently lose out to other grant applications who put in more of their own money, which score higher. We need to establish the sub-grant program permanently within the border-to-border grant program, where the Office of Broadband Development may use up to $30 million strictly for applications where the 50% match formula is inadequate and allow them to match up to 75%. This will put those projects that can't make a business case at 50% in a separate program where they don't have to compete with other projects that can make it work at 50% or less. The MTA looks forward to working with the legislature and the governor to truly obtain border-to-border broadband in Minnesota. And I thank you for your support for rural broadband. And with that, I'm happy to stand for questions.
Thank you, President Brent. Our next testifier is Brian Cranbier from Me Energy Cooperative. If you can identify yourself before the committee, proceed.
Madam Chair, members of the committee, my name is Brian Cranbier. I am the president and CEO of My Energy Cooperative. We are an electric distribution cooperative headquartered in Rushford, Minnesota, in the southeastern part of our great state. I am also chairman of My Broadband, which is a broadband partnership of an electric co-op, My Energy, Spring Grove Communications, and Mabel Cooperative Telephone. And we're in the job of delivering broadband to unserved and underserved residents of southeastern Minnesota. I'm also testifying on behalf of the Minnesota Rural Electric Association, and I would also like to disclose that I currently serve on the governor's task force for broadband. My Broadband has been a recipient of 2 Minnesota Border-to-Border Broadband Awards and 2 Federal Reconnect Awards. We've extended fiber to the home to over 2,000 customers since the creation of our organization in 2018. The density of our electric cooperative is 5,500 miles, and we provide service to 19,000 members. That's a density of less than 4 members per mile of line. We are seeing the same density on our broadband builds out, which results in significantly higher broadband build-out costs. Therefore, like Mr. Christensen and the others, we very much support the creation of a new low-density program to complement the current border-to-border broadband program that mirrors the current pilot program. We would request the lower density program become a permanent tool for the Office of Broadband Development. We would also like to express our support for the proposed $276 million for the border-to-border broadband program. This program has been a tremendous success, and its greatest need is simply funding for the program to get the job done. Finally, we would also support increasing the border-to-border cap from $5 million to $10 million in a future amendment. This number has not been adjusted for a number of years. With increasing costs of broadband, I think this would be a very appropriate alignment. Thank you for allowing me to share my comments today, and Representative Purcell for bringing this bill forward. I would stand for questions.
All right, thank you, President Ryan. There are no further testifiers. Are there any public testifiers that would like to testify? Yes, you may come to the committee table. Please identify yourself before the committee and proceed. If you can, please keep your remarks under 2 minutes.
I'm Barbara Jarrett Klein from Leicester County. We're neighbors. And I'm here to talk on behalf, I've been a planner for Leicester County since January of 2018. And I wanted to comment on the small tax base, difficult time that the counties and townships will have moving ahead without that 75-25. We have already spent a significant amount of local dollars, a lot of CARES Act dollars. We did not dedicate our next federal dollars because RDOF came through, we weren't eligible for anything. But when we look at the rest of our county, which is 2/3, we need 75-25 to proceed. And when you talk about broadband speeds, the average for some of our providers is 8 down and 1 up across the county. In town, it's 2 down, 1 up for a dentist in Montgomery, Minnesota. So we are really have desperate needs in outstate Minnesota, and are really pleased that you are carrying these 2 bills forward for us. That it would help us tremendously.
All right, thank you. And with that, we'll move to the discussion of the bill, the DE1 amendment. Representative Jacob.
Thank you, Chair Vang. So, first of all, just so I understand, is this for local units of government only, or is this for private parties as well as local units of government?
Representative Purcell.
I believe the grant program goes to the private companies to provide the service.
Yeah,
Representative Jacob.
I guess the question would be, are private citizens eligible if they need an extension from that?
Representative Purcell.
I don't believe that's how the bill is structured.
Okay. So,
Representative Jacob.
second question then would be, what we found in Winona County is that even with the county kicking in a portion above and beyond what the state kicks in, we have some areas in the bluff country that are just cost prohibitive to reach. So if a company is granted the 75% and it's just nowhere close to the amount of money they need to hit some of these places, will they be required by statute to still go forward, even if the 25% that they have to cover is a large number? Will they be forced to provide service to everybody in the area?
Representative Purcell.
That's not my understanding of the bill, but maybe I could phone a friend who has been working on this longer than I have.
Who would you like to call?
I don't know
Representative
if
Purcell.
Mr. Zacharias can come up, or If you want to come up, you can
Oh, I
come
see
up
someone from the
too.
department. If you can identify yourself
Identify
before the
yourself.
committee.
Thank you, members and Madam Chair. My name is Devin Bowdry, Legislative Liaison for Deaton. And I might need to hear the end of your question. You're asking if,
So some of the properties in Winona County are just, they're cost prohibitive to reach. So even if the state is paying 75%, the 25% that the company is required to pay, I mean, they still might not want to go to that site because the 25% is a huge number. So, if the goal is to reach everybody, will this statute force those companies at whatever it costs them for their 25% to reach those unserved residents?
Sorry, can you please identify yourself before the committee?
yes, Devin Bowdry.
Please
Madam
proceed.
Chair, Representative, there's no forcing the organization to go, it's just an incentive. So right now, we're talking about 75-25. And as previous testifiers have mentioned, the further out you get, the harder it is, or the more expensive it is. So possibly at a future date, we talk about adjusting that percentage match as well. But no, we would encourage an entity, a provider to maybe get creative with different funding options, could be their own. Localities can put up funding toward the project as well. So the office stands ready to help provide technical assistance to make this work.
Representative Jacob.
Thank you.
Representative Anderson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciated the testimony of Mr. Christensen. He really explained well how these two funding mechanisms would work, the 50% and the 75%, so that cleared it up. Another testifier mentioned that we have a shortfall of state funding of $422 million. Your bill, Representative Purcell, spends about 276, which leaves about 146 million. Now, there's a lot of federal money coming in as well, so would you anticipate with these kind of funding levels that within 3 years, for example, we could have the state totally covered?
Representative Purcell.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Representative Anderson. I would love that to be the case, but I am no expert in this area, so I'm not sure if that's a question that you would be able to answer.
Mr. Baldry.
Madam Chair, Representative, it's sort of a moving target to see where the funding between state and federal kind of meets in the middle here. Hard to estimate where we'll be in 3 years.
Representative Anderson.
Thank you again, Madam Chair. Just one follow-up then. It was mentioned, and I certainly agree that we don't want to lose an entire construction season. But as I recall, we've just had a couple of significant awarding of grants. One was 100 million and one was 60 million for the next 2 years. So your funding wouldn't be for this coming construction season. How far out would your funding take the program, Representative?
Representative Purcell or Mr. Baldry.
Madam Chair, Representative, so this funding would begin in fiscal year '24, so we'd be able to launch a grant program this year, this calendar year. But without this funding, we would have no program. We just closed our latest RFP and we'll be awarding things, but with the uncertainty of the timing of the federal funds, we would need this to have a construction season this year.
Representative Anderson.
Again, did you say you need this for this year's construction season?
Madam
Mr.
Chair,
Baldry?
Representative, yes, later in this calendar year.
Okay,
All right. Representative Cha.
Thank you, Representative Purcell, for bringing this bill forward. Broadband is essential and important to all farmers across America. I was just reading this FCC article where, technologies in broadband will increase the yield of our farmers to 8.7% in increase and decreases about 2.5% in spending. And so, to ensure that we have more farmers in America, giving them the right tools and access is the right way to go. And so I appreciate you bringing this bill forward to align it with Biden's WIJ bills and then with Governor Watt's initiative. So thank you.
Representative Nelson.
Thank you, Chair Vang and Representative Purcell. Thank you for bringing this bill forward, and it's important. I think part of the area I serve, Pine County and Kanabec County, I think they're ranked 85th and 87th in the state for broadband. We are a very poor area for broadband service, and this is critical. And one of the things that I think also needs to be addressed in there is the last mile of funding, because oftentimes there's fiber in the ditch, but not able to hook up to a home. So I think, maybe that's something that we could work together on, in the amendment, if there's something that we can ensure that, that last mile, making sure that connection does go to the home, because as I've told people, Interstate 35 goes from here to Duluth, or, well, farther than that, but, if there's no exits at Pine City or Hinckley or Ascov or anywhere else, it doesn't do us a whole lot of good. And, I think that's an important thing about, remembering broadband is, we can't make sure that, we can't just fund it and put the cable in the ditch. We need to make sure that our homes and our businesses are able to be connected as well. So, thank you for bringing this bill, and I appreciate continuing to work on this. So, thank you.
All right. Any further discussion? Closing remarks, Representative Purcell.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, members. I think we are all in agreement that this is important work. It's now officially under the umbrella of our committee. Study after study shows that students, businesses, farms, and families that have access to quality broadband do better, and the need for broadband is not going away. Our state statute says that every Minnesotan should have access to a connection of 100 megabits per second download and 20 megabits per second upload by 2026. House File 2313 will make a big difference in communities across the state and help us move toward meeting our state speed goals. I ask the committee for its support. Thank you, Madam Chair.
All right, and with that, Representative Purcell renews her motion that House File 2313 be laid over for possible inclusion.